Welcome everybody to the Chess Angle. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is the solo season. I'm probably not going to have any interviews this season. I might, but I'm really enjoying this. This was always my intention, which I've said many times. Now, are we still going to have guests on the show? Absolutely, of course. But I think moving forward, it's going to be more the type of thing where a guest sort of falls into my lap, or maybe a friend recommends him, where I'll get the info like so-and-so grandmaster lives near me. I spoke to him. He already wants to be on your show. Something like frictionless like that, where it falls into my lap. Again, I'm really enjoying these solo episodes. Now with the guests, I love all our guests. We've had some fantastic interview episodes, but if I'm being honest, I don't miss those times where a guest was like, yeah, I'm using my second cousin's 10-year-old Chromebook and I don't have high-speed Wi-Fi. And, it sounds like they're talking into a tin can in a subway or something. Now I have like some post-processing stuff that I use, like software, which I didn't have when I first started the pod, but I'm a little bit more familiar and versed with that stuff now. Anyway, there were times in the past where, you had situations like that. Now it's interesting. Some of the top podcasts, I mean the ones that are in the like 0.5%, something like Work Life with Adam Grant or like Tim Ferriss, or Jordan Harbinger, guys like those. I mean, I don't know if those specific shows do this, but what a lot of shows at that level do, the shows where they have like a staff of like 15 people, they have producers and interns and writers and sound engineers, you know what I'm talking about. What they'll do, and this is based on anecdotal evidence from what I've heard, they'll actually send their guest a microphone, which in some cases they might let them keep. In other cases, they have to send it back. But they'll actually send their guest a microphone and hook them up with like an audio person who can help them use it. Of course, they have the resources and the staff to do that. We're not that fancy here. Or if they can't do that, they'll actually book time in a studio near the guest and they'll do it remotely. So those are some things I've heard just about the podcasting world. But when I was in those situations where there were audio issues just because the person didn't have an external microphone, I certainly don't miss that. So there are some definite advantages to going solo. Now, again, as I said, are we going to have guests on the show? Of course, absolutely. But a lot of the other pods are doing that format anyway. That's kind of out there, some of the other chess pods. And a lot of times too, as I mentioned before, it's kind of the same people over and over. And then the other thing I'm running into, and this is not a complaint at all. I'm not saying this in a negative way, because obviously whatever space you're in, you're not going to be the only person in that space. Obviously, you're going to have to deal. So a lot of times there'll be a guest that I was maybe interested in, and okay, let me do a little research. Let me contact the person, and then they're on another pod. And I'm the type of person, I don't want to have a guest on who was just on another pod. I mean, I don't think I've done that. If that's the case, then that was inadvertent. I probably wasn't aware of it. I mean, I don't listen to every chess podcast out there. I try to see what's going on, but there are some I listen to. There are some I don't. There are probably some I may not know about. So that's happened more than once, where there was someone I was interested in interviewing, and then it's almost like, not a rat race, but if someone else snatched them up, that's fine. And I'll listen to it. That's cool. That's part of content creation. But having my solo episodes, it just avoids a lot of the administrative overhead and those types of things that you have to deal with, where when I do a solo podcast, I can basically just record whenever I can. I have my equipment. The audio quality is going to be good. At least I hope it is. So that's where my head is at right now. And as I've said, that was always kind of the intention with this podcast anyway, my own thoughts as a player, as a TD, about improving as an adult who's living in the real world with an actual real world day job and a family and other responsibilities and other interests outside of chess. Like, one of the things I'm going to talk about today with our main topic is, I know for me, I'm never going to reach 2200, because 2000 might be a possibility, but I'm never going to reach 2200 because I know I'm not going to put in that kind of time. I don't want to put in that kind of time. If I won the lotto tomorrow, I wouldn't want to put in that kind of time. And I have other interests and things that I do outside of chess or outside of strictly improving and boosting my rating. And I like that. I like my life that way. I think that's true for many of you as well. You want to get better, but you have a life. That's kind of what this podcast is about. Because I think, too, the time I spend in putting this podcast together, could that be time that I could be studying chess? Of course. As you know, I'm an avid reader. Regardless of how busy I am, I always have to have a book that I'm reading at any given time. But instead of doing that, could I be studying chess instead? Sure, I could. But losing that balance would actually make me unhappy. So I just have other interests and other responsibilities outside of chess that I'm kind of trying to be realistic about my goals. So a little bit of a tangent there. We'll talk more about that later when we get to the topic of the perception of what makes you a good player, quote unquote, good player. Should be a very interesting show. We also have a very cool listener mailbag segment. So a couple of reminders. Everyone is invited and encouraged to email me if you have a question for me or a topic idea for the show, or even a comment. Because I think in the show notes, I just say if you have a question or a topic idea, even if you have a comment, like, you talked about this, but here's my 2 cents on it. Or you said this, and you know what? I actually think you should have mentioned this and you forgot. Or you know what, Neil, you said this. I actually disagree. I had a different experience. Give me a shout out. Definitely email me info@thechessangle.com. I've been getting great emails from you guys, really thoughtful, well-written emails with excellent questions. So we've got another good listener mailbag segment coming up. So again, email me info@thechessangle.com. You can also go to the contact form in the website. It's going to the same inbox. One's not better than the other. So you can go to thechessangle.com, click the contact form. Remember, we're also on X or Twitter. I still call it Twitter. I think everybody still calls it Twitter. But we're on X at the Chess Angle. So feel free to follow us. Please follow us if you're on Twitter. I'm not a power Twitter user. I mostly post episode announcements. Maybe once in a blue moon, I'll post a position. I'm actually going to be posting a poll in a second. I'll explain what that's about. And again, our website is thechessangle.com. Now, in a moment, I want to talk about our YouTube channel, our Chess Angle Podcast YouTube channel briefly. But first, I want to give a shout out last night to our friend Dan Levin. Dan was a previous guest on the pod. I believe he was on the show twice. Amateur player. He's an attorney right here on Long Island. He is a Long Island Chess Club regular. And I want to shout out Dan because he did something last night that was just a really, really good show of sportsmanship where I don't know if a lot of tournament players would do that, including myself, if I'm being honest. So he was playing a higher rated opponent last night. He's almost 1,800. Dan was over 1,800 for a while. And kind of like me and the rest of us, he kind of dipped down. But I think now he's almost back there. He's maybe 1,790, 1,800. So he's kind of getting back to where he was. His opponent was 2,100. They're in a tricky rook and pawn ending. It's basically king, rook, and 3 versus king, rook, and 4. His opponent had the 3 pawns. So Dan had the extra pawn, but again, they were on both sides of the board. Very tough position. His opponent's playing really well. And at this point, they have less than 4 minutes each on their clock. Now, we're playing with a 10-second delay, but still, his opponent had maybe 3 minutes. Dan was similar. And more than once in that time pressure, his opponent didn't press his clock, and Dan actually pointed it out to him, which I thought was a great show of sportsmanship. Now, you may be like, what's the big deal? I think a lot of players in a tense game, and this is board 1 of the tournament, would perhaps not have said something. They would have maybe played dumb and when they were, you ran out of time. And I give him credit. And it's an interesting sort of conundrum. It's an interesting thought experiment. Should you tell your opponent, especially if they're an experienced tournament player, should you tell him or her to hit their clock if they forget? Because you can look at it 2 ways. You can look at it as it's the right thing to do. It's good sportsmanship. It's, the game of kings. It's a gentlemanly game. Or you could say, you know what? If I blunder and I hang a mate in 2, what am I going to tell him? You have a mate in 2? Would you tell him that? So why are you going to tell him to hit his clock? That might not be a fair analogy, but it's an interesting thing. Now, technically, as far as the rules, you're under no obligation to tell your opponent to press his clock. If your opponent forgets to hit his clock, that's on him. But I'm really wondering how many of us in a tense tournament situation would do that. But I give Dan a lot of credit. They ended up drawing. And as I said, it was just a really cool act of sportsmanship. So what I'm going to do, I usually don't do this, but this is interesting. I'm going to put a poll on our Twitter page. This is not some cheesy thing to get you to subscribe to the page or anything. If you don't want to subscribe, then that's fine. Okay. I'm not doing anything gimmicky here. I'm just genuinely curious what people think. So on our Twitter page at the Chess Angle, there's always a link in the show notes. I'm going to put a poll and it's going to say, do you tell your opponent if he forgets to press his clock? Now, for some people, I'm assuming it's going to be, well, it depends. Like if it's a beginner or something like that, or maybe you know your opponent's not feeling well, maybe they're a senior citizen, they don't see too well, that type of thing, then maybe you're more inclined to do it. And the argument could be, well, you know what? If it's a seasoned tournament player, or if I'm playing, let's say, some young kid, actually, it doesn't have to be a young kid. If I'm playing anybody, an adult or a kid who's been really annoying the whole game, well, then maybe I won't tell them. If it's someone who's a friend who's really nice, I would tell them. I'm curious what people think. But anyway, shout out to Dan. It was really cool to see at the club last night. It really is a great bunch of guys. All right, I want to talk now about our Chess Angle YouTube channel quickly, but this is very important. Our YouTube channel, the Chess Angle Podcast. Here's the deal right now. I am looking to get this channel to 1,000 subscribers. Right now, we're at 852 subscribers. That's the live number as I'm recording this. So 852, my math is embarrassingly bad. That's what? So it'll be 148. So we need 148, let's say 150, we'll round up. We need 150 of you to subscribe to the Chess Angle Podcast YouTube channel, and we'll get to 1,000 subscribers. So I'm asking for your help. Now, we have thousands of people who listen to this podcast all over the world. So even if a small portion of you were to subscribe, we would easily meet our goal. Now, of course, I don't want to stop at 1,000. Of course, I want to get as many as we can. I mean, that's the initial goal, is to get 1,000. Then my next goal would be 5,000, 10,000. YouTube is tricky. It's a hard thing to do. There's a little bit of a luck factor. Now, a couple of things. A cynic is going to say, well, Neil, you want to get to 1,000 subscribers because that's the number you need to monetize, which is true. I think it's like 1,000 subscribers and you need something like 4,000 watch hours every 12 months. I will tell you now, all right, I'm laughing. I promise you it's not because I want to monetize, all right? I looked into this. If I did monetize the YouTube channel, that would be well down the road, because if you only have 1,000 subscribers, the bare minimum, and you join their monetization program on YouTube, whatever it's called, AdSense, I've only looked at it briefly, I would get something like, $3.41 a month. I mean, it's something, okay, so I promise you, I don't want 1,000 subscribers because I want to monetize. I want 1,000 subscribers because those quadruple digits, once you get to 1,000, that's considered like a milestone. Like that's considered like the first step of saying, you know what, your channel is successful. Now, here's the other thing with YouTube. As most of you know, it is an algorithm-based platform. Now, yes, I know everything's algorithm-based, like Twitter and TikTok and all that, but here's the thing. I feel like the YouTube algorithm is much more sensitive. So the reason I want your help is the more people who subscribe and really who watch the videos, like the videos, comment, that's going to get it picked up by the algorithm. The site, the YouTube channel, it's sort of picked up by the algorithm, but just a little bit. And obviously it's a snowball effect. So the more people who subscribe and who interact with the channel, either through comments and likes, watch hours, things like that, what'll happen is the algorithm, is going to pick it up and show it to more and more people. So I need your help. A lot of you tell me you like the show, it helps you out, and I really appreciate that. I appreciate all the kind words. So I'm asking for you to give back. It's not going to cost you a penny. I'm not asking for your money. I know, everything is like so expensive nowadays. I'm asking you for something that's not going to cost you a penny. Please subscribe to the Chess Angle YouTube channel. You can look up the Chess Angle Podcast on YouTube. And of course, there's a link in the show notes. Let's get this bad boy to 1,000 subscribers, over 1,000 subscribers. If everyone listening to this were to do that, we're going to crush it. I mean, we're going to get a lot more than that. So I ask for your help in that regard, and I'm kind of stepping up that channel a little bit. You'll notice the thumbnails are probably a little better. I hooked up with a thumbnail artist. I'm using some of the money from the ad revenue from the audio podcast. I know I run ads now, but it helps with overhead and expenses. It's expensive to run a podcast. So I'm putting some of that money back into the show to kind of help streamline my workflow. So I'm trying to step it up. Now, the other thing also, I know that I have a still image instead of video, which I realize I was talking to a friend of mine who's a successful content creator in a different field, not chess. And he was like, Neil, like when you have that still image, he goes, that's killing you with the algorithm. I totally get that. I'm not at a point personally where I'm ready to put my face and do a video version. That's something I'm looking into. I'm not quite there yet as far as my own head, because as someone who works full time like you and with the family, I've developed a workflow with all the software and tools I have that's pretty streamlined, and it took a lot of trial and error. So now if I add a video component, that's going to disrupt my workflow. So I kind of have to think about what that would look like and how I would do that. So that's something that may happen down the road. But with your support, subscribing to the channel and interacting with the channel, hopefully that'll help counteract some of the algorithm issues I have because it's a still image. But I ask for your help. You know me, I'm not one of these content creators who's constantly doing the call to action stuff and, I need your support and, I need you to give me money on my Patreon because, I need to keep the lights on. Like, I don't do that stuff. I want you to crush the like button. That's not me. I guess I'm going down that road a little bit today because I really do want to boost up the YouTube channel. All right. So like I said, let's get this to over 1,000 subscribers. I would love your help. Really appreciate it. And all the other things that you guys have been doing, the 5-star reviews, keep those coming. The shout outs, tell your chess playing friends. As I'm recording this, I know that was a little long winded, but in my defense, you know that I very rarely give speeches like that. But like I said, let's get the YouTube channel to over 1,000 subscribers. All the links are in the show notes, or the link, I should say, for the YouTube channel is in the show notes. I sincerely appreciate your support. I don't want to do any type of prize or incentivize this, and I haven't done that. All of our reviews have been great, but nothing's been incentivized. I don't want to do like a chess.com free membership thing. I mean, I have a relationship with them. I can do it. They offered. I did it once on Twitter, and I don't know, it just felt, for me, I'm not, I know a lot of people do that. I'm saying just for me personally, it just felt a little icky. And if I say, if you write a review and then post on Twitter that you did it, I'll put you in a drawing for a free chess.com. That feels, and I'm glad I stopped that because all the reviews, everything has been done organically and of people's own accord. So in case people are wondering like, yo, why don't you run I don't want to incentivize it. I want people to join the YouTube channel, subscribe, to give 5-star reviews because they want to, because they genuinely feel that way, not because I'm incentivizing it. That's just my attitude. Maybe that's a little old school, but that's where I'm at. So that's my speech on promotion and the podcast and where my head is at. At some point during the week, I'm not asking you to drop everything right now, but let's get that YouTube channel to 1,000 subscribers. Really, really appreciate your help. And now let's change gears and go to our listener mailbag.
You've got mail.
Our first email is from Tim in the Netherlands. He says, "Hey Neil, great podcast. I was wondering, in the Netherlands, we had a rating inflation correction, or I think he means rating deflation correction, last year where I gained 150 points. I never heard you talk about this in the podcast, so I was wondering if this is only for Dutch ratings or also FIDE and maybe US CF. All right, thanks, Tim, for the kind words and your email. I think I mentioned this once. As far as I know, in the US here, They're just kind of talking about it, but nothing's been done. FIDE, I'm not sure. I'm not really a FIDE person. I don't know. I know it's proposed. I don't know if FIDE actually did a rating deflation thing. And I'm going to confess, I didn't look it up before I recorded. Because like I said, if FIDE doesn't really concern me. But I like the idea of doing that. Now, what has been suggested, these aren't my suggestions. So one idea, which I think makes a lot of sense, is to not start new players at quote unquote unrated, which is essentially a 0 rating. Start them at like 1400. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that's fair because if you start them at 1400, if they really are a weak player, if they're much weaker than that, that's going to show up pretty quickly. If they really are much stronger, that'll show up quicker as well. It's better that they're starting at 1400 though, because if they do upset a higher rated player, that higher rated player's rating isn't going to take as much of a hit because you started them at 1400 instead of 0. So I like that idea. The second thing, I like the idea of a rating deflation correction of about 150 points, which is what you mentioned. I kind of like that. Maybe even 100 points. 100 points might be better. I think that's good. I don't think that's excessive. I think that will solve a lot of problems. Do a 100 to 150 point increase for everybody. And I mean, you'd have to figure it out. It would have to be for players who, I guess, are established or have been playing in a certain number of tournaments, I guess. I don't know how that would work with someone who's new to tournament chess, but unless you're also starting with 1400, you'd have to work out the logistics. But just as a general statement, I think giving everybody a 100 to 150 point boost is a good idea. Even just 100 points is good. So we're in agreement there, Tim. But as far as I know, with US chess, these are just rumors and ideas. Nothing has been done. I haven't heard anything that it's imminent, but I know it's floating out there. If I were to guess, I don't think US chess is going to do anything. I don't think it's going to change. That's just my guess. And if it were to happen, I don't think it's going to be for a while, like years down the road. I could be wrong. I hope I am wrong, but that's what I think. Thanks so much, Tim, for your email. Our next message is from Jim. He says, Neil, as per my post on the YouTube comments for this episode, I found a forum on chess.com where someone started to post the PGN files for this book. I started adding to it as I go through the games. So hopefully this forum will become the hub for the full book, either by me over time or hopefully others if the chess community will start to contribute. He's referring to the world's most instructive amateur game book by Dan Heisman. I took a look at the forum. It's pretty good. What I'm actually doing, Jim, is as I'm going through the book, and yeah, by the way, my goal of finishing it by Labor Day didn't happen. That, man plans, God laughs, but that's okay. I kind of anticipated that result. But anyhow, what I'm doing as I'm going through each game, I'm actually creating a database in the chess.com library. And then once I have it all done, I'll make it public. So I'm actually doing it that way rather than through a forum. But, maybe I'll contribute to the forum as well. I'll put a link for it in the show notes if anyone wants to check it out. And then there was a second part of Jim's email. He says, I have been a pod listener since episode 1 and really relate to your content. It has been helpful for me as I continue to improve as an adult. Maybe you can consider sharing thoughts on how to study annotated game books. Here's my process. 1. I quickly play through the game via the PGN, via tablet, phone, or laptop, and move the pieces on the board to get a feel for how the game plays out and try to observe some quote-unquote critical moments. Sometimes I do this from both white and black's perspective. Number 2, go through the game again via the PGN, manually moving the pieces on the board while reading the annotations and comments. I often pause to quiz myself, what is the next best move? Number 3, if I want to review a variation, I simply move the pieces on the board to reflect the variation, then look back at the on-screen PGN to easily reset the pieces to the original position. This has been key for me since I used to get lost in the variations and ignore them due to frustration or have to set up 2 boards for this purpose. Number 4, after I finish the game, I run the PGN through the chess.com game review to see how the engine analyzes the moves for additional perspective. I have found this approach to be helpful. I would appreciate you sharing your thoughts on how you approach studying these annotated games. Thank you again for the great podcast, and I hope you win your next game. Jim, thanks so much for the kind words. I think your method is good. It's definitely time consuming. And honestly, for me, I know this probably isn't best. You should kind of do it yourself first, but I usually just go straight to the engine. You know, Alex King, FM Alex King, who was a guest twice on this pod, he and I were talking about that. And even, you know, he's an FM and we were both like, yeah, we just go straight to the engine. But the way you're doing it is good. I like your approach. I appreciate you sharing that. Now, for me, as far as going straight to the engine, I remember when I was a much weaker player, I had read Reassess Your Chess by Jeremy Silman. Now, Reassess Your Chess, in my mind, is sort of a more advanced version of The Amateur's Mind. Reassess Your Chess is sort of like The Amateur's Mind on 3 shots of espresso. So if you want to study Silman's method of the imbalances, I would read The Amateur's Mind first. And then if you want to sort of put it into practice and take it further, I would read Reassess Your Chess. And I remember in Reassess Your Chess, I forget which edition, I don't have it in front of me, he had this whole thing about you should write your thoughts in a notebook. Like when you analyze your game, just write pages and pages of your thoughts in your notebook and then analyze it and go back to it. And he just had this whole thing about writing down your own analysis of the position. I did that. And for me, it did nothing. It did absolutely nothing for my improvement. It was a colossal waste of time. And I found that by going straight to the engine, it was more productive. But Jim, I want to be very clear. That's just for me. A lot of people have spoken about writing their own personal notes and analyzing their game thoroughly without an engine first. And it's really helped them. So maybe I'm an outlier there, but I had tried stuff like that. For me, it just didn't work. I'm just sort of a go straight to the engine type of guy. And as I mentioned in the last episode, I also use the engine responsibly, not mindlessly. I spoke in the last episode about how I don't think the engine is a bad thing or that it turns off your brain if you use it properly. But Jim, I appreciate you sharing your method. Thanks so much for the email. We're going to take a very short break for a few messages, and we'll be back to finish up the listener mailbag. Don't go away. Our final email is from Xavier from Missouri. He says, hello, my name is Xavier. I'm from Missouri. I should probably not include in the introduction something that's already in the body of the email. All right. Note to self. Anyway, I'm going to start over. My name is Xavier. I'm from Missouri and I'm 22. Recently, I went to New York City and I played chess at Washington Square Park. It was some of the most fun I've ever had playing chess. I was wondering if you had any ideas on how people in less populated areas could try to make an area like that known for chess. I would love to have a park near me where people play chess daily, but unfortunately my only option for live chess is Chess Club every Friday. Thank you. Well, Xavier, thanks so much for your email. And I like that you use the word fun. You said it was some of the most fun I've ever had playing chess. And we all need to remember, myself included, that it is supposed to be fun. Of course, we all want to get better and we get frustrated when we lose. But bottom line, this really is a fun activity. Now, a couple of things. You have to understand Washington Square Park is an institution. It has a long-standing history for chess. It's been featured in movies and in the media. And like I said, it's really an established institution. So just keep that in mind. And I will say, as far as any ideas, you simply need to start it. Just do it. You can't talk about it in the abstract. You can't post about it. What I would recommend, find a friend or a couple of friends from the club you mentioned and just go to this park and start playing. Set up some boards and, then you would post, right? Set up some boards, start playing, post whatever, Facebook, social media, email, and say, look, we're meeting at this park on, Wednesday at 7 p.m. We're meeting at this park on Sunday at 10 a.m., right? You can listen to the Chess Angle in the car on the way on Sunday, right? When we drop a new episode. No, but anyway, just grab some friends and start it. And eventually over time, it'll build up. Now I'm going to say a couple things. You got to be consistent. You got to do it on a regular basis. And you can't get discouraged if there's not much of a turnout. If you do it sporadically or piecemeal, like maybe 1 month you do it one time, another month you do it three. It has to be consistent. I would say like every week, try to come up with a set time, keep posting on it over and over and over. And then you have to wait it out and just be patient, but just do it. Just start it. You want a park near you that's going to be known for chess? Then go to a park with some chessboards and your friends and start playing. And eventually through word of mouth, hopefully it'll happen. That's really my advice. Just do it. That's why I started the Long Island Chess Club. I was unhappy. I'm not going to go into detail because I've given this speech 1,000 times, but the TLDR, as the kids say, I was unhappy with the chess scene on Long Island. So I started my own club. I didn't overthink it. I just did it and it worked out. And I was very patient. It took a lot of years, but that's what I would do. Just do it, right? The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. All right. Little corny, but true. All right. So Xavier, I wish you the best of luck. If you go through with that, keep me posted. I'd love to hear how that works out. So that was the mail. Now we are going to get to the main topic for this week's episode, and it involves another Reddit post. I'm finding that the chess subreddit, once you weed through the nonsense, is actually quite good. I like the fact that most of the posts and the responses are from amateur players, so you can really get a good idea of the psyche, of the mood, and of the general thoughts of people at that level. And this week, we're going to explore what it means to be good at chess, quote unquote good. What does it mean to be good at chess? When can you say to someone that you're good at chess? Are adult improvers, quote unquote, good at chess? I find this a fascinating question. I think it goes to outlook and perception and goals and chess psychology and motivation. I think there's a lot of things we can explore. I'm just finding it's really good content for the podcast because it kind of fits into our theme here. And what I like to do is look at the responses and then share my thoughts where appropriate. Even just listening to people's responses, I think, is very informative and instructive and entertaining. And the name of this Reddit post, which of course I'm going to include a link for in the show notes, is when can you tell someone you are good at chess? Great question. So let's unpack this. Let's look at what some people said, and I'm going to share my own thoughts as well. So here we go. So one theme that kept popping up is that people said if you're a tournament player, even if you're rated like 1,000, 1,200 around there, you're significantly better than most of the general population who says they quote unquote play chess. That was a theme that came up quite a bit. So mathematician Bulky 40 said, at 1,500, you are in the top 5% of players on chess.com, and you'd probably beat 99.9% of the world's population at chess. But there's also people who would wipe the floor with you while wearing a blindfold, so what can you do? Kind of accurate if you think about it. All right, so the next comment is by Chuck_Portis. He says, okay, but the question was, are you good at chess? Not, are you one of the top chess players in the world? Quite honestly, even an 800 would look like a chess god compared to any recreational player who never studied the game. I'd say more than half the educated population would say they quote unquote know how to play chess, and yet 99% of them would get smoked by an 800 on chess.com. Very true. It reminds me of Nick Weisel's comment. Shout out to Nick. Everyone knows Nick from Twitter. He was a guest on the pod. He made a similar comment when Nick was on the pod, which is that if you're a higher rated player and you're facing someone much lower rated, you can't take them for granted because that 1,000 player is going to beat the average person off the street who says, oh yeah, I know how to play chess. And if you become cavalier during your game, they'll beat you as well. And I see it all the time at the club where someone rated 1,000 or 1,200 will draw or beat like a 1,600 player. Happens all the time. And then someone wrote, again, mathematician Bulky 40, who made the earlier comment, said, he mentioned, this is a famous quote, right? The ability to play chess is a sign of a gentleman. The ability to play chess well is a sign of a wasted life, right? I mean, I kind of alluded to that earlier. Even if I had the time, right? If I won the lotto tomorrow, would I want to spend 8 hours a day studying chess, even if I had the time to do it? Like, is that really normal? Now, don't get me wrong. I completely honor people who put in that time and dedication. But I'm just saying, for most of us, even if you had the time, would you really want to do that. I mean, for me, it's like I said, I have other interests, and even if I had the time to do it, I just wouldn't do it. And also, it gets to the point of what they call diminishing returns. If you study, are you really going to be able to study effectively for 8 hours a day? I know that we hear people do it, but I think most of us, regardless of your intelligence, I mean, are you really going to be able to study that much? I mean, for me, even if I had the time, I don't study this much, but I mean, if I were to put in even an hour or two a day, I mean, anything beyond that, it's like my brain, you know what I'm saying? Like it's diminishing returns. Like if you're studying 2 hours a day, if all of a sudden you study 6 hours a day, are those extra 4 hours going to make a difference? Maybe for some people. But I think for a lot of others, it's just, you're just rearranging the furniture on the Titanic. I mean, I don't know, because, there were times when I was younger where I would have longer study sessions. I'm, pre-kids, pre-marriage, many, many, many years ago. And even back then, I mean, it got to a point where you could only do so much in one day, where if you tried to push it, it became counterproductive. And I want to say something else also. I'm not crazy about the term adult improver. I mean, it's one of those terms, like I'm still going to use it. It's such a part of the lexicon. Like, of course, I'm still going to use it, but it's one of those things I use it reluctantly and begrudgingly. The term adult improver, I don't know, there's something pejorative and like patronizing about it. Oh, you're an adult improver. I don't know. Maybe you think I'm crazy, but we need like a better term. I don't know. I'm just not crazy about it. It's like I'm in education, that it's like, why do they call the main academic, the quote unquote main academic subjects like math, English, language arts, social studies, science? Those are the core subjects, right? That's the word they use here in the States. I don't know how it is internationally, but here in the States, right? That's the core subject areas. Like here in New York on the East Coast, it even sounds like core, right? It sounds almost like military, right? Those are the core subjects. But yet the other areas which I'm involved in, like, music, art, library, physical education, things like that, those are the special areas, right? We're the special areas. We're special. I don't like that term. I don't like that. Like that's right up there with adult improver, right? The core subjects, and the special areas. Like, why isn't my subject of music core? Why am I special? I don't know. Like, I that's one of those things. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter, but it still like bothers me. I never liked that term, special area. It's the same thing in chess, like adult improver. I mean, we use it. I don't know. I'm going to try to think of a better term. It just doesn't quite work for me. I mean, like I said, it's so embedded in the chess culture. I'm still going to use it. I mean, it's the title of this episode. I don't know. That's just how my brain works. Just wanted to share that. Moving on. MTFW wrote, "This is how it is with any hobby or game. Once you get to quote unquote good, you have the experience to understand how much you don't know." Yeah, I like that. I agree with you. So in other words, when you're starting out, you don't know what you don't know. So very well said. Salty Trey Young Stan said, "Yup, if you are unrated and just beat all of your friends, you'll think you're good at chess. But if you have a rating and play regularly and lose 50% of your games as an 1800 and realize there are people at 2000, 2200, 2400 plus who are significantly better than you, you'll say, I'm okay, even though you'll crush 99.9% of people." So yeah, it's all relative. Like when the 1600 player looks at the 1800 and says, wow, you're 1800, I want to be 1800. The 1800 player is, yeah, like, yeah, it's all right, I really want to be 2000, right? And then the 1800 player looks at the 2000 player, wow, you're 2000, I want to be 2000. And the 2000 player is like, yeah, it's all right, I really want to be 2200. I think I gave that speech before, but that's, that's how it is. We're never satisfied because it's all relative to what we compare it to. And then Kyotso, he wrote like Dunning-Kruger be like. The Dunning-Kruger effect, of course, is the idea that we overestimate how good we are at something. Humans tend to think they're much better at something than they actually are. That's the Dunning-Kruger effect. I'm sure most of you have heard of that. And then WindowLick4H, WindowLick4H says, "I don't know, man. For me, OTB is a different game entirely to online. My vision is completely different. And I sometimes lose to friends who are like 900. So WindowLick4H, I agree with you completely there. And that's one of the things I think about. There's something about the perception, the feel, it's just the whole experience of playing on a computer versus playing live. The whole, I guess, 2D versus 3D thing. it's a completely different experience. Like we had the club last night and I'm showing up, I'm exhausted, but I'm still playing. There's just something about sitting there live and there's just nothing like it. And when you play on your computer, it's almost your approach to the game is almost different. Like it shouldn't be. You want it to be similar. You want to use your online practice to kind of simulate an over the board situation, but it's very, very hard. So I agree with you. Like for me, my whole perception and outlook online is different. And you sometimes find yourself, I try to fight this, but it's hard online where you'll try riskier things that you would never in a million years do over the board. And I guess you could argue it makes sense because it's just an online game, but could that lead to poor habits? Maybe. But I agree with you. Like when you say that over the board is a completely different game from playing online, I agree completely. It's something I struggle with. And then mathematician Bulky 40, again, I guess he chimed in a lot. He said it's mad that GMs are out there just having normal jobs and stuff. There's basically no money in chess. I kind of disagree with that because while I absolutely honor and admire GMs, I mean, I don't know that you're entitled to earn a living playing a board game. There's an old musicians saying, if you're a performer, if you want to make money in music, sell your instrument. I mean, so the argument that there's no money in it, I agree. But again, it's a board game. And I don't agree that, well, if you want to make a living playing chess, you should be entitled to do that. I just don't agree with that. And besides, a lot of titled players have day jobs and they still do very well. Jay Bonin was a courier for many years. I am Jay Bonin, the Iron Man, friend of the pod. He was on the show. Karsten Hansen, FM Karsten Hansen, fantastic player, fantastic educator. He was on the pod as well. He has a day job, I believe. A lot of them do. And I don't know, just like the idea that, oh, well, this GM, he's not able to earn a living playing chess. Okay, but like, are you really supposed to? Again, it's a board game. Like how, you know what I'm saying? I mean, as far as earning money just playing, I mean, only like the top, like the super GMs, I mean, there's a very small percentage of players in that realm. Most title players do have day jobs or they teach. I mean, if you have a very active teaching and chess coaching practice, you can earn a full-time salary, of course. You can do that. There's a lot of money in teaching chess. And in content creation, I mean, look at like guys like Levy Rosman, Hikaru, millions of followers on YouTube. Now, speaking of the difference between titled players and amateurs, Salty Trey Young Stan made another comment, and this is about the super GMs versus the rest of us. He says, Magnus is truly mind-blowing. I think it was a 60-minute segment that he was in, and he played 10 games of chess simultaneously while facing away from the boards. I don't think he was playing super high-rated players or anything, but just being able to track and remember the positions of 10 games at once in your head is mind-blowing. He said sometimes he would forget the position of a certain piece, and he would need to take 30 seconds to replay all of the moves of that game to remember where he was. Well, I mean, that's Magnus, of course. So I mean, we shouldn't compare ourselves to someone like that, but it's definitely an interesting comment. Greg_Guy also added to the whole idea that you don't really know what you don't know until you get better. He said, when people ask, whether you're good at chess, he says, I'm good enough at chess to know how bad I am at chess. I think that's true for a lot of us. Like the more you play this game, you realize how much you have to know. I honestly think people underestimate just how much better than the rest of the population, even a 1200 who plays every day and knows a few openings is. If you were playing someone who knew the rules and plays casually, you'd be winning constantly. But when you define good as versus other habitual chess players who also study openings, etc., then it gets harder to define. For me, I'd be happy plateauing around 2000, 2100. Feels like by then you have, number one, really good grasp of principles. Number two, good opening repertoire to a good level of depth. Number three, blunders and mistakes are a rarity rather than the norm. And number four, actually have a reasonable chance at taking results versus titled players. I like this comment a lot. Now, for whoever this was, where he says, I'd be happy plateauing around 2000, 2100, amen. Can I get an amen? I agree with you. Like 2000 would be an ultimate goal for me as well. I would die happy if I got that rating. I came close, but I agree with you. Like for me, as I said before, 2200 is not going to happen for me just because I have too many other things going on, and I don't have the time or the desire. Even if I had the time, I don't have the desire for that type of achievement. I would be thrilled if I got an expert rating, because again, I just have other interests and responsibilities outside of chess, as do many of you. That's a major theme for this podcast. The next one, any researcher 5914 says, I'm 2070, rating of 2070, and have zero opening prep. None. I don't even have a dedicated opening preference to either color. It's all very time consuming and not worth it at only 2,000, 2,100. Endgame theory, though, is worth it for every player at any level. So let's do it. Any researcher 5914, let's do it. Let's all blow off opening repertoire and just play. No, but I actually like this comment. Is that Jared Tavares? Jared Tavares, is that you? Did you post that? I'm joking. Jared's a friend, Long Island Chess Club player. He was also on the pod. I always tease Jared because he's a 2000 player. I mean, he bounces around like high 1900s, low 2000s. And I always tease Jared because his opening repertoire is non-existent. He plays these like wild openings that I don't even know what you'd call it. He just kind of moves pieces. But the thing with Jared, he has such good chess skill. Like he can just look at any position and just come up with a reasonable move, whereas most of us are scratching our head. So any researcher 5914, you probably have strong chess skill as well, I'm guessing. But, I don't agree with that approach, but there are players out there who can play that way because they have such skill that they really don't have to spend a lot of time on openings, but I don't think most players could get away with that. So there's a lot more to talk about. This is a fantastic thread, but I'm going to just read two more sort of themes. There was a big section on playing kids, and someone wrote, my son started at 6, and it's surprising how many people know chess well enough to know how it works, but still barely beat an 8-year-old boy. Before, I would have guessed people either have no idea how the game works or are passable at it. And then someone said, Boris Lovechild, well, I was playing in a rapid tournament at a FIDE 1400 and got my butt handed to me by a succession of kids aged between 6 and 8. After a while, I realized that this was how it is, and I got over it. Yeah, I mean, most of those major tournaments now, a lot of kids. Someone else said, yeah, decided to enter my first over-the-board tournament around age 31, and most of the pairings were little kids, all very good though. Kind of put me off trying more in-person events, as not a good feeling beating up on kids by playing boring closed positions. Someone else said, actually Boris Lovechild again, one tournament I was in, I think I lost 5 straight games against kids no older than 9. Kid number 6 really did not have a clue. I was like clubbing a baby seal. I admit thinking to myself, sorry kid, I need this win more than you do. And then final comment here, yeah, kids are tactical machines for some reason. Would love to know the explanation for that. Managed to do okay playing the Traxler as they all go for the fried liver without fail if given a chance. That or boring them to death with a London system Petrov. I don't know what the Traxler is. That's maybe an E4 thing? I honestly don't know what that is. Maybe some of you do. But yeah, now when you say boring them to death with a London, I don't know if that's partly in jest. I agree, and this is not a novel thought for me. When I play kids, I try to play very, very closed, boring positions. I try to remove their like tactical prowess. They want these like open, messy tactics, like pieces flying everywhere. I try to avoid that, make things very closed and boring. And then the idea is that they'll try to force things. They'll try to create a tactic where one doesn't exist. And I'm going to end with this one. Someone wrote, I'm 900 and casually play coworkers at lunch. And not only have I never lost, but I find myself taking leniencies and making dumb moves because I know they won't see the opportunity to take a piece. And these are people that when they find out I play chess, they get excited to play and say, that's why there's a set on the lunch table. Let's play. People who genuinely enjoy playing casually. Yeah, I mean, I've said this. The casual players who don't care about ratings and tournaments and stuff like that, I think they're a lot happier and more well-adjusted than many of us. But I would say this, I would be careful of that coffee house chess approach. I mean, the term coffee house chess, that's how I learned it. Coffee house chess is basically where you deliberately play moves that you know are bad. They're almost blunders because it sets like a cheesy trap and you know your opponent's not going to see it. Like if they did see it, you would lose, but you know they're not. So you deliberately play these bad moves and these dumb moves, like you say. But that's a very, very bad habit. If you ever want to get serious in playing tournaments and improve, that's not something you want to do, where you sort of dumb down your game against a much weaker player. Very, very dangerous place to go. But I think what he's saying in this post is that I think he's just sort of having fun and just doing it casually. But if you're serious in improvement, I definitely wouldn't go that route. I'm going to end it here. Appreciate you listening. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Please subscribe to the Chess Angle Podcast YouTube channel. Check out some of the videos like it, but definitely subscribe. Really appreciate it. Just asking you to give back. Won't cost a penny. And as always, I hope you win your next game. Have a great day, everybody.